Sit with me for a moment. I want to talk about something most people never stop to consider because the noise of their own lives drowns it out. They're too busy chasing, grasping, comparing. They never pause long enough to ask the one question that changes everything. Why am I built this way? My name is Walter. I've spent the better part of my life watching people, not judging them, just watching the way they move through the world. The way some seem to carry an invisible weight, a pull towards something larger than survival. And over the years, I've come to believe that a certain kind of person is set apart before they ever understand it themselves. Not made better. Set apart. There's a difference, and we'll get to it. Now, the title that brought you here uses the word billionaire. Let me be honest with you right away, because I'd rather lose you now than lie to you for 20 minutes. I'm not here to promise you a yacht. Wealth, real wealth, the kind that lasts and doesn't rot the soul carrying it, is rarely about the number in an account. It's about capacity. It's about how much you were built to hold responsibility or vision, the weight of other people's hopes resting on your decisions. Some souls are forged with an unusual largeness, and when Scripture talks about those who are given much, it's never talking only about money. It's talking about the size of the container. So let's talk about why yours might be larger than you've allowed yourself to believe. The first thing I've noticed in people built for more is that they were never quite at home. You know what I mean. From childhood, there was this faint dislocation, like a word on the tip of the tongue you can never say. Other kids settled into the rhythm of things, the games, the cliques, the easy belonging, and you stood slightly to the side, watching, always watching. People called you distant, maybe shy, maybe difficult. But it wasn't any of that. It was that part of you knew it had arrived somewhere it didn't fully come from. Abraham was told to leave. Leave your country, your kindred, your father's house, and go to a land I will show you. Notice God didn't say where. He just said, go. And the man went, at an age when most people have stopped going anywhere. The ones built for largeness almost always carry that same unspoken instruction in their bones. A restlessness that no comfortable life can quiet. If you've never felt at home anywhere, it may not be a wound. It may be a compass. The second reason is harder to say out loud, so I'll just say it. You were given a strange relationship with loss. I've sat across from a lot of successful people in my time, and the thing that surprised me, the thing I didn't expect, was how much they'd lost. Not despite their success, almost as a precondition of it. They lost early, and they lost deep. A parent, a sense of safety, a version of themselves they thought they'd get to keep. And somewhere in the rubble of that loss, something got installed in them that you can't install any other way. A baseline, a floor. They learned, far too young, that the worst thing can happen and the sun still comes up the next morning, indifferent and bright, and you still have to decide what to do with the day. People who've never lost anything are terrified of losing everything. That terror makes them small. It makes them clutch. They can't take the risks that wealth requires because every risk feels like standing at the edge of annihilation. But you, if you've already walked through fire once, you know the temperature of it. You know it doesn't actually kill the thing inside you that matters. Job lost everything, his children, his health, his fortune, the respect of his community, even the comfort of his own wife's understanding. And what the story tells us, the part people skip past, is that what he received afterward was greater than what he started with, not as a reward, as a consequence of having become a man who could no longer be destroyed by loss. If you've buried more than your share, this is not God forgetting you. This is the forge. The third thing, you feel responsible for things that aren't your fault. I want you to really hear this one, because it cuts both ways and most people only ever feel the cutting edge. You walk into a room and you sense the tension before anyone speaks. A friend is struggling and you carry it home with you. You lie awake with it. You feel it as though the burden were assigned to you personally. People tell you you take on too much, that you need boundaries. And they're not entirely wrong, but they're missing what's underneath. The capacity to feel responsible is the raw material of leadership. Every person who has ever built something that mattered, a company, a movement, a family that holds together across generations, did it because they couldn't stop feeling responsible for outcomes that lesser people would have shrugged off. Nehemiah heard that the walls of a city he'd never even lived in were broken down, and he wept. He sat down and wept and fasted for days over a ruin that was, by any reasonable accounting, none of his business. And that grief became the engine that rebuilt the walls in 52 days, something armies and kings had failed to do. The weight you carry isn't dysfunction. It's an unrefined version of stewardship. The work of a lifetime is learning to aim it to stop drowning in everyone's pain and start building the thing that actually relieves it. Let me tell you something from my own life here, because I don't want to sit above this conversation like I figured it all out from a comfortable chair. There was a season, years back, when I had money, real money, by the standards I'd grown up with, and I was miserable in a way I couldn't explain to anyone, because how do you complain about success without sounding like a fool? I'd hit the number I'd been chasing and the chase just emptied out, like a glass turned over. I remember sitting in a car in a parking lot, I won't tell you which one, it doesn't matter, and feeling this hollowness so total I couldn't drive. And the thing that came to me, sitting there, was a question I'd never let myself ask. What is all of this for? I didn't have an answer. That was the terrifying part. I had built a life optimized for an outcome I'd never examined. And the wealth, instead of being the destination, became the mirror. It showed me that I'd been pouring water into a vessel I'd never bothered to inspect, and the vessel had a crack in the bottom I'd been ignoring my whole life. That's the day my real education started. Not when I made the money. When I sat in that car and understood I'd had the equation backwards. Which brings me to the fourth reason. The ones built for more are almost always given a long delay. This is the part that breaks people. They look around at 25, at 35, at 50, and everyone else seems to be arriving while they're still standing at the gate. The friends with the houses, the careers that took off, the lives that look settled and sure, and they conclude that they've been passed over, forgotten, that whatever was supposed to happen for them simply isn't going to. But I've watched this pattern too many times to believe in it as failure anymore. Joseph had the dream as a boy, the dream where everyone bowed to him, and between that dream and its fulfillment came the pit, the slavery, the false accusation, the prison, the years of being forgotten by a man who'd promised to remember him. 13 years, by the traditional count, between the promise and the throne. Moses spent 40 years on the backside of a desert, tending another man's sheep before the bush ever burned. David was anointed king as a boy and then spent years running for his life in caves, hunted by the very throne he'd been promised. The delay isn't the absence of the calling. The delay is the calling in its early form. Because a soul built to hold something large has to be enlarged first, and enlargement is slow and it hurts. You cannot pour an ocean into a teacup. The waiting you're cursing is the widening you'll one day thank God for, when you finally hold the thing and you don't shatter under the weight of it. The fifth reason is that you can't lie to yourself for very long. Most people can. It's almost a survival skill, the ability to tell yourself a comfortable story and believe it. But you've probably noticed you don't have that luxury. You catch yourself. You see your own rationalizations forming, and you can't unsee them. You'll be halfway through justifying something, and a quiet voice in the back of your mind says, "That's not the real reason," and the whole construction collapses. It's exhausting. It makes you harder on yourself than anyone else ever is. But understand what that is. That's a conscience that won't be bribed. And in a world that runs increasingly on self-deception, on telling people what they want to hear, on building castles out of comfortable lies, a person who cannot successfully lie to themselves is rarer and more valuable than they know. The book of Proverbs keeps circling back to one idea, that the foundation of everything that lasts is truth, and the thing that brings down houses and kingdoms is the lie a man tells himself in the dark. Wealth built on self-deception is a house on sand. You were given a built-in inspector that won't accept the bribe. It feels like a torment now. It's the thing that will keep you standing when others fall. The sixth reason is your hunger doesn't match your circumstances. There's a particular kind of person who, no matter what they achieve, feels a quiet dissatisfaction underneath it. They reach the goal and, within weeks, the goal looks small. People who don't understand this think it's ingratitude. And sometimes the person carrying it thinks so too. They feel guilty for never being satisfied, for always wanting the next thing, the larger thing, the truer thing. But this hunger isn't greed. Greed wants more of the same. This is different. This is a hunger that's pointing at something it can't yet name. Ecclesiastes says, God has set eternity in the human heart, and I think for some people that setting is turned up much higher than for others. They carry a homesickness for a largeness they've never seen. And that homesickness, if they don't understand it, will drive them mad. They'll try to fill an infinite-shaped hole with finite things, money, status, approval, and none of it will work, because none of it is the right size. But if they understand it, that same hunger becomes the most powerful engine a human being can possess. The refusal to settle, the endless reach toward something worthy of the reach. Don't curse your hunger. Most people have to manufacture motivation. You were born with a furnace. And the seventh reason, the one that holds all the others together, is that you were given the strange gift of being misunderstood. I've saved this for last, because it's the one that costs the most to live with. People built for largeness are almost never understood by the people closest to them. Their vision sounds like fantasy. Their standards sound like arrogance. Their refusal to settle sounds like restlessness or pride or ingratitude. And the loneliness of that of being unable to make even the people who love you see what you see is one of the heaviest things a person can carry. But look at every figure in the long story of Scripture who was given something to build. Noah, building a boat on dry land while his neighbors laughed. Joseph, telling his brothers a dream that made them want to kill him. Jeremiah, weeping over a message no one wanted to hear. Even the carpenter from Nazareth, whose own family at one point thought he'd lost his mind and came to take him home. The pattern is so consistent, it stops being coincidence and starts being a principle. The ones sent to build something new are rarely understood by the world they're sent to build it in. The misunderstanding isn't proof you're wrong. Sometimes it's proof you're early. So let me draw all of this back together before we finish. I started by saying these souls are set apart, not made better, and I want to make sure you didn't miss the weight of that. Set apart is not a privilege you get to feel superior about. It's a burden disguised as a blessing, or maybe a blessing disguised as a burden. I've never been able to decide which. To be built for largeness means you will feel things more, lose more, wait longer, doubt deeper, and walk lonelier than the people around you. The size of the container determines the depth of the ache when it's empty. That's the part the motivational sellers never tell you. The capacity that makes you able to hold wealth, real wealth, the kind measured in lives touched and not just dollars accumulated, is the same capacity that makes the empty seasons so unbearable. And here's the thing I most want you to take from our time together. None of these 7 things is, by itself, a guarantee. A large container left empty is just a large emptiness. The dislocation can curdle into bitterness. The loss can harden into cynicism. The hunger can rot into envy. The misunderstanding can drive you into isolation and pride. Every single one of these gifts has a shadow, and the shadow is where most people built for more actually end up not failed because they lacked the capacity, but failed because they never understood what the capacity was for, and so they aimed it at the wrong thing. That's what I learned in that parking lot, in that car, with the hollowness sitting in my chest. I'd been given a large container, and I'd spent my whole life filling it with the one substance that could never fill it. And the grace of it, looking back now, is that the emptiness was loud enough to stop me. Some people never get stopped. They keep filling and filling until the day they die, never once asking what the vessel was built to carry. So, if you recognize yourself in what I've said tonight, if you've felt the dislocation, carried the disproportionate weight, waited through the long delay, lived with the hunger that nothing satisfies, then hear me. You weren't shortchanged. You were handed something most people never receive and many couldn't survive. The question was never whether you were chosen for largeness. The question is what you'll finally decide to pour into the space you were given. I'd rather you got that right than rich. Though I've come to suspect that when a person gets that right, the other thing tends to follow, not always as money, but always as abundance of the kind that doesn't leave you hollow in a parking lot at the end of it. Now, I want to hear from you, because I've done enough talking. Of these 7, tell me in the comments which one landed in your chest like it was written for you. Not all of them, just the one that made you go still for a second. I read these, and the one you choose tells me more about where you are right now than anything else could. So, leave it there. Let me know which one found you.